When the world collapses under the weight of its own infection, and the dead begin boarding flights they never bought tickets for, there's one place that instantly becomes both a dream and a nightmare: the airport. Once a gateway to the world, it's now a massive steel tomb echoing with the whispers of flight announcements that will never come again. Flight 237 to London, delayed indefinitely, the loudspeakers might say, if they still had power. You stand there in the middle of it all, rows of abandoned suitcases, flickering fluorescent lights, and the smell of jet fuel lingering in the air like a forgotten warning. The big question remains: in a zombie apocalypse, is surviving in an airport good or bad? Let's taxi to the runway of survival, with a touch of madness and maybe a bit of humor to keep the fear from boarding. Airports are cities within cities. They have their own food supply, power, water systems, security checkpoints, and enough steel and glass to make you feel like you're living inside a spaceship. That sounds perfect for survival at first glance. Think about it. Multiple levels of infrastructure built to withstand thousands of people per day, with sturdy architecture designed to resist not only weather but potential disasters. Large open spaces mean visibility. You can see approaching zombies before they get close. Long corridors, jet bridges, maintenance tunnels, all can be used strategically for defense or escape. In the right hands, an airport could transform into a fortress of the skies, a stronghold where survivors live beneath the giant letters of departures and arrivals, waiting for a world that will never depart nor arrive again. But then again, airports were designed for crowds. That's the first major problem. When the infection hit, airports would have become ground zero for chaos, panic, mass gatherings, and people trying desperately to leave the country. You can imagine it. One infected passenger coughing at the gate, one security officer trying to calm a crowd of hundreds, and within hours, the entire terminal becomes a feeding ground. The sheer number of bodies trapped inside makes it one of the worst places to be during the first wave. The echoing halls that once carried the sound of rolling luggage now reverberate with distant screams and dragging footsteps. Unless you arrive much later, when everything has already fallen silent, your first day in the airport will likely end with you being someone's in-flight meal. Still, let's say you got lucky. You found the airport long after the chaos settled. Zombies roam aimlessly between baggage belts and duty-free stores, their decayed hands brushing against shelves filled with untouched perfume bottles and overpriced chocolate. You move cautiously through the terminal, flashlight cutting through dust and darkness, and you start to realize the potential. Food. There's plenty, at least for a while. Most airports have restaurants, vending machines, and staff break rooms filled with supplies. There's bottled water and storage, energy drinks, even wine. Sure, you'll have to live off Pringles and miniature whiskey bottles for a few months, but it beats eating canned beans in a sewer. Security is another plus. Airports are loaded with fences, surveillance systems, and reinforced doors. Some areas like control towers and maintenance sectors are heavily restricted, often built with thick walls and secure locks. You could easily fortify one of these as your main base. The air traffic control tower, for instance, offers both high visibility and isolation. Zombies can't climb stairs easily, especially spiral ones. And from up there, you'd have a 360-degree view of the wasteland. Imagine the irony of watching over empty runways where planes will never land again, while you sip airport wine and pretend you're the last air traffic controller on Earth. But now, we taxi to the dark side of airport survival, the maintenance nightmare. Power won't last forever. Generators will run dry, and fuel supplies stored underground will eventually go bad. When that happens, everything inside that metal giant becomes a cold, lifeless maze. Without electricity, the conveyor belts stop, the elevators freeze mid-floor, and darkness consumes every corridor. You'll be surrounded by glass windows, impossible to cover completely. Every light you make will shine like a beacon, attracting anything undead in a mile radius. And let's not forget, the airport is surrounded by flat open land. No forest to hide in, no cliffs to block paths. You'll see the zombies coming, but they'll see you too. And what about airplanes? They seem tempting, Massive metal shelters with doors you can lock and windows too high to reach. But they're also traps. Once you're inside, your space is limited, your escape routes few. One zombie sneaks on board, and suddenly you're in a flying coffin without the flying. The narrow aisles and low ceilings make defense almost impossible. You can't even swing a bat properly. Sure, you could camp inside a private jet for the luxury of comfort and nostalgia, maybe even sleep in the pilot's chair pretending to take off, but one breach, and that plane becomes your tomb with a view. Then, there's sanitation. Airports rely heavily on complex plumbing and cleaning systems. Once water stops flowing, toilets become unusable, and hygiene goes downhill fast. The smell alone could become unbearable. Add to that decomposing corpses scattered across terminals, and suddenly your glamorous sky fortress feels more like a biohazard museum. You can't just crack a window. Most of them don't open. You'll need to manage waste, disease, and air quality carefully, or you'll die of infection before any zombie bites you. Let's also talk about the human factor. Airports, with their abundance of supplies and visibility, will attract other survivors. That means conflict. Maybe they'll want your tower, your food, your stash of airline snacks. The wide-open layout gives little privacy. Negotiations could go south fast. Imagine getting ambushed in a duty-free perfume store. Tragic and ironic. He died surrounded by Gucci, they'll say. However, if you're smart, you can use the airport size to your advantage. It's huge, far larger than most survivors could control. You can choose one terminal, seal off the others, and create a control zone. The rest becomes a buffer filled with traps or noise distractions. Those little airport vehicles and baggage carts, perfect for barricades or quick transport. The underground maintenance tunnels, great escape routes if the main terminal gets overrun. And if you find a working radio in the control room, you might even reach out to distant survivors, or at least pretend to. Hearing a human voice again, even static-filled and distant, could be worth more than gold in this world. There's also the symbolic factor. Living in an airport means living in the shadow of escape. Every day, you'd look out the window at the empty runways, dreaming that maybe, just maybe, one day a plane might return. That illusion could keep hope alive or drive you mad. Humans weren't meant to live in terminals. We passed through them. They were liminal spaces, temporary by design. Staying there forever is like being stuck in the waiting room of civilization's afterlife. On the other hand, think of the perks. You could build a rooftop garden on the terminal roof, use solar panels if you can scavenge them, and turn the parking lot into a fortified courtyard. The jet fuel, though volatile, could be used sparingly for fire or machinery. If you're resourceful enough, you could even make the airport partially self-sustaining. After all, humanity has built cities out of worse ruins. But then comes the cold, final question. When zombies roam the earth, what does an airport really represent? Freedom or failure? For centuries, airports symbolized our greatest achievement. Flight, connection, the ability to go anywhere. In the apocalypse, that symbolism turns cruel. You're trapped in a place built for leaving, but there's nowhere left to go. You sleep beside departure gates that will never open again, surrounded by metal birds that will never soar. The same runways that once carried dreams now stretch endlessly into silence, a perfect metaphor for humanity's grounded future. So is surviving in an airport good or bad? The answer depends on timing, luck, and mindset. Early apocalypse? Terrible idea. Too many bodies, too much chaos. Mid to late apocalypse, when the dead have thinned and the power's gone. It becomes one of the most fascinating survival challenges out there. A balance between luxury and death trap, civilization and ruin. It's not the safest, not the cleanest, but perhaps the most poetic. You live surrounded by the skeleton of progress, the echo of humanity's greatest invention, the dream of flight. And maybe on quiet nights, when the wind blows through the shattered glass and the moonlight reflects off a rusted airplane wing, you'll close your eyes and imagine the roar of engines once again, lifting you above the dead world below. Because in the end, airports are not just structures, they're reminders. Reminders of movement, of connection, of what we lost. If you can survive in one, you've mastered irony itself. You found a way to live in a monument to travel without ever leaving. So, survive in an airport in a zombie apocalypse? Good, but only if you can handle the loneliness, the ghosts of humanity's past, and the constant sound of your own footsteps echoing across empty runways. Otherwise, you might just find that the worst part of the apocalypse isn't the zombies outside, but the departure gate that never opens again.